I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathize with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered.
The nation expected to see Queen Camilla walking beside King Charles during what the palace had already described as his final major royal ceremony. Instead, when the chapel doors opened, another woman appeared at the king's side. Catherine stepped forward, took the position reserved for Camilla, and walked into history without hesitation. No explanation was offered. No announcement softened the blow. In one carefully arranged moment, the monarchy revealed that something profound had changed. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles chose the service of Crown and Commonwealth as the closing chapter of his ceremonial reign. The service, a formal gathering honoring the monarchy's bond with Britain and the Commonwealth, brought senior royals, foreign representatives, military leaders, and national figures beneath St. George's Chapel. This was not another appearance. It was his chance to define how the nation remembered his duty. Camilla expected to enter beside him, sit to his right, receive the clergy's ceremonial acknowledgement, and stand with him during the final blessing. Every rehearsal document that week confirmed her place. Then an equerry entered her private receiving room, carrying a revised procession card. She read Catherine's name beside the monarch's and asked, "When was this decided?" The officer lowered his eyes. He could not answer. Catherine waited outside the chapel with William and fought to steady her breathing. The princess understood that each step would look like a declaration about succession, the transfer of royal duty between generations. William watched her tighten her grip on the program. He told her that she had not taken anything. She had been asked to carry it. Charles ended every doubt. Moments before the doors opened, the king turned toward Catherine and offered his arm. She hesitated for one breath, then accepted. His gesture made the truth unmistakable. The change was neither accidental nor temporary. The sovereign had chosen who would stand beside him. Camilla entered later and found herself seated behind Princess Anne and opposite Prince Edward. Catherine occupied the Queen's designated chair, received the acknowledgement intended for the monarch's wife, and remained beside Charles throughout the service. An attendant lifted Camilla's embroidered order of service from the front row seat and replaced it with Catherine's. Paper touched wood. Nothing moved. The nation saw the substitution. It did not yet see the sealed instruction behind it, or the confrontation that convinced Charles the old arrangement could no longer survive. To understand why he placed Catherine beside him, the story must leave the chapel and enter loyalties, fears, and rivalries that made one empty chair more powerful than any proclamation. The ceremony was not simply about Catherine replacing Camilla. It exposed four people standing at the edge of a future none of them could fully control. Charles was confronting the limits of his reign. Camilla was watching her position weaken in public. William was being forced closer to the throne. Catherine was being asked to carry authority before she had ever openly claimed it. Behind the royal composure, each of them understood the same truth. Nothing would return to normal. Charles felt the weight more sharply than anyone. He saw the service as his final chance to shape how his reign would be remembered after years of family conflict, public judgment, and uncertainty. The crown, the institution built around the sovereign and the line of succession, had to appear steady. Yet every attempt to preserve unity revealed another fracture inside his own household. Catherine had become the strongest bridge between the monarchy's present and its future. Her calm manner reassured the public without making tradition feel distant. The king believed she could carry the institution through a painful transition, but she did not view that confidence as a triumph. To her, it felt like a burden arriving before she was ready to accept it. Camilla feared something far more personal than losing a chair. She feared being erased from the final image of the reign she had spent decades defending. Alone before the service, the queen removed the brooch chosen for the occasion and placed it back inside its case. Her fingers trembled as the lid closed. She had fought to stand beside Charles, and now the monarchy seemed prepared to remember him without her there. William understood that pain, even while protecting Catherine. He knew the revised arrangement strengthened their future position, but it also publicly diminished his father's wife. Before the chapel doors opened, the prince leaned toward Catherine and said, "Do not look back once the doors open." She heard the warning beneath the reassurance. Princess Anne watched everything with guarded calm. She had already read the sealed order approving the change, a private royal instruction carrying the king's authority, yet she refused to reveal whether she had supported it or simply witnessed it. Her silence made the decision feel even more serious. Catherine had never requested Camilla's place. The previous evening, Charles summoned her privately and slid the final procession card across a small table. She read her own name beside his and immediately suggested that the Queen should remain there. The monarch placed his pen down and answered, "This is not a reward, it is a responsibility." William later found Catherine holding that card near an unlit fireplace. She admitted the ceremony might look like victory when it felt like stepping into a storm. He closed the folder and promised she would not face it alone. Their fear had begun weeks earlier. During a smaller royal event, Camilla made one decision about Catherine's future role, forcing Charles to choose between preserving peace and protecting the succession. The substitution at St. George's Chapel was only the consequence. The true point of no return had already happened. Every royal rupture has a moment that later appears inevitable. For Charles, it came during a private rehearsal at Buckingham Palace, 3 weeks before his final ceremony. What began as a discussion about chairs, entrances, and ceremonial precedents turned into a direct challenge over Catherine's place in the monarchy. One instruction was given, one name was removed, and as the king watched the future princess take a step backward, he realized the conflict was no longer about protocol. It was about succession itself. Charles had gathered the senior royals in the palace ballroom for the Crown Heritage reception rehearsal. The reception was designed to show continuity between the current reign and William's future leadership, giving the public a clear sense that the monarchy could pass from one generation to the next without fear. Catherine's place beside the prince mattered, because it signaled that she would share the burden ahead. Camilla had begun taking greater control over the ceremonial details surrounding the king's final appearances. The Queen believed she was protecting the dignity of the present reign and preventing William's household from appearing too eager to assume authority. Yet beneath that concern was a deeper fear. Every step forward for Catherine seemed to make her own position feel less secure. The breaking point came without warning. Camilla turned to the Lord Chamberlain, the senior official responsible for organizing major royal ceremonies, and instructed him to remove Catherine from the front receiving line. One of the Queen's senior companions would take her place. Catherine would enter later with the extended family, away from William during the acknowledgement of the next generation. Catherine heard every word. She did not argue, protest, or ask for special treatment. She stepped backward, folded her rehearsal card, and told the official she would follow whatever arrangement Charles approved. Her silence carried more force than anger could have managed. William did not remain silent. The prince asked Camilla whether the order had come from his father. She answered that the king should not be burdened with every ceremonial detail. William looked toward Charles and immediately understood the truth. The monarch had authorized nothing. Charles refused to challenge Camilla in front of the family. He completed the rehearsal, spoke briefly with the clergy, and left without explanation. Some believed his silence meant acceptance. Princess Anne knew better. She watched her brother lift Catherine's discarded procession card from a side table and carry it away. Charles confronted Camilla behind closed doors. She argued that William and Catherine had become too visible and that his reign could not end with the nation already focused on theirs. The king answered, "Continuity is not disloyalty." Charles then placed the folded card between them. Catherine's name had been crossed out in dark ink. He smoothed the paper and said, "You did not move a chair. You altered the line of succession in front of the family." Camilla refused to apologize. That refusal changed everything. The crossed-out name remained on Charles' desk, but its meaning followed them into the final week, when husband and wife would confront each other without witnesses, ceremony, or room left for compromise. The final confrontation did not erupt before courtiers or before the household. It happened inside Charles' private sitting room, with the doors shut and every aide dismissed. Camilla entered believing she could persuade him to restore the original ceremony plan. She left knowing the decision had already been made. Between them stood decades of sacrifice and survival. Yet on that night, the king was no longer speaking only as a husband. He was defending what would come after him. Camilla sensed the change before anyone explained it. Her private secretary had not received the final procession schedule, the document setting out who would enter, sit, and stand during the service. When she demanded a copy, the ceremonial positions page was missing. That absence told her enough. Charles had prepared for the confrontation. He dismissed his staff, closed the door, and placed 2 folders on the table. One held the original plan. The other contained a revised order signed in his own hand. He knew the conversation could wound their marriage, but delay risked a public rupture. Camilla entered without waiting to be announced. She asked whether Catherine had been placed beside him. Charles answered yes. The Queen accused him of turning his final ceremony into a rehearsal for William's reign before his own chapter had closed. Camilla reached for the past. She reminded him of the hostility, ridicule, and rejection she had endured to remain beside him. Her voice broke when she asked whether the monarchy was prepared to display her as temporary after decades of judgment. Charles did not deny her suffering. He said the decision did not erase their marriage, but love could not outweigh the stability of the crown. Watching Catherine removed during the earlier rehearsal had convinced him that the future was no longer being welcomed. It was being treated as a threat. Camilla said she would not attend if expected to sit behind Catherine. The king did not plead. He told her attendance was her choice, but the procession order would remain. Charles opened the second folder. The signed directive stated that Catherine would stand beside the sovereign, while Camilla would attend as queen, without the central ceremonial role. Princess Anne's witness mark appeared beneath his signature. Camilla read the page twice, set it down, and walked toward the door. She paused, waiting for him to call her back. He remained silent. The latch closed as his hand rested on an unsigned note he had hoped to give her. The argument ended there, but the decision had moved beyond their marriage. Anne, William, and the king's advisors were now guarding a transfer of ceremonial power, whose full meaning Camilla had only begun to understand. Catherine's place beside Charles looked spontaneous to the nation, but nothing about it was accidental. The revised procession had been protected through sealed instructions, restricted rehearsals, and a circle so small that even senior household figures did not know the truth. At the center stood Princess Anne, the royal least interested in spectacle, and therefore the one Charles trusted most. She did not create the decision. She ensured it survived, and in doing so, she became the guardian of her brother's final command. Charles alone possessed the authority to alter the formation of his final service. Yet royal power could not move a single chair without cooperation. The Lord Chamberlain managed ceremonial order. The master of the household coordinated palace operations. The chapel clergy controlled the service, and security officials governed every royal movement. One leak could destroy the plan before it began. The king feared exactly that. Early disclosure would invite resistance, private appeals, and pressure to remove Catherine from the position. He limited the truth to Anne, William, and 2 trusted officials. Everyone else received only the instructions necessary to complete their part. Charles summoned Anne to the library after Camilla left his sitting room. She read the signed directive without interruption. Then the Princess Royal removed her glasses and asked whether he understood what the public would see. Catherine beside him would not look like a simple succession signal. It would look like a judgment on his marriage. Charles admitted the danger. He told his sister that refusing to act would allow personal rivalry to weaken the future crown. Anne did not celebrate his reasoning. She remembered the discipline their mother had demanded from them, and understood that continuity required a visible bridge from one reign to the next. She signed as witness, not because the decision brought satisfaction, but because she believed it had become necessary. Secrecy then hardened into strategy. 2 ceremony schedules were circulated. The public version still placed Camilla beside Charles, while the sealed operational copy named Catherine. Officials would collect the false pages only minutes before the procession, leaving no time for negotiation. William received a separate handwritten message from his father. Charles ordered him not to intervene if Camilla protested. Catherine had to enter calmly, and no family dispute could reach the chapel doors. The prince read the note twice before folding it into his pocket. One obstacle remained. The Lord Chamberlain hesitated when instructed to move the Queen's chair. Anne placed the signed directive on his desk and held his gaze. You are not being asked to choose between 2 women. You are being instructed by the sovereign. The chair moved within the hour. By dawn, every position had been fixed and every order sealed. Yet no document could control Camilla's reaction when she arrived and discovered that the monarchy had reorganized itself around her absence. The first consequence arrived before a single hymn was sung. Camilla entered the royal apartments expecting tension, but not exclusion. Then she saw Catherine's name on the procession board and understood that everyone around her already knew. Aides lowered their eyes. Footmen became unnaturally still. No one dared explain what the king had signed. In that narrow corridor, the queen realized the decision was no longer private. It had become an arrangement the entire royal household was prepared to obey. The senior royals had gathered in separate rooms near St. George's Chapel. Catherine prepared with only one aide beside her. William received final security instructions, and Charles remained alone for several minutes before the procession. Each of them waited under the same silence, but none carried the same fear. Camilla soon received the full order. She would enter with Princess Anne and Prince Edward rather than beside the king. She would retain her title and ceremonial insignia, the symbols showing her royal rank, but she would not receive the central acknowledgement or stand beside Charles during the final blessing. The Queen moved toward the robing room and saw the final formation displayed on an easel. Catherine's name appeared beside Charles at the top. Her own had been moved to the second line. Camilla stopped so suddenly that the aide behind her nearly collided with her. "Remove it," she told the equerry. The young official lowered his voice and explained that the board had to remain for operational clarity, meaning every member of the household needed it to follow the approved order. Camilla's expression hardened. A junior officer was now enforcing a decision made against her wishes, and everyone in that corridor had witnessed it. Catherine heard that Camilla had arrived and immediately offered to speak with her. William advised against it. The prince feared one private exchange could destabilize both women only minutes before the doors opened. Catherine looked toward the closed corridor door, then remained where she was, uneasy and silent. Camilla's car still waited in the lower courtyard. For several tense minutes, no one knew whether she would leave. Anne entered the receiving room and found her standing without gloves, staring at the revised schedule. The Princess Royal did not soften the truth. Charles would not change the plan. Camilla could leave and make the family fracture undeniable, or she could enter with dignity and stop the ceremony from becoming a public collapse. Camilla said nothing. Then she lifted her gloves one at a time, pulled them on, and smoothed the cuffs. "Then let us finish this." Her voice remained controlled, but Anne saw the tears before the Queen turned away. Camilla had chosen public dignity over private revolt. Yet beyond the chapel doors, Charles was preparing to tell Catherine why he had placed the full weight of his final ceremony on her shoulders. For all the ceremony surrounding them, the decisive moment came without advisors, documents, or witnesses. Charles and Catherine stood alone in the antechamber while the chapel waited. Beyond the doors were cameras, dignitaries, and a family struggling to remain composed. Inside, the king spoke not as a sovereign issuing another command, but as a father-in-law confronting the end of his public chapter. What he told Catherine transformed the procession from a royal substitution into a personal act of trust. A delay in the musical entrance left them alone for several minutes. William had already moved to his assigned position, while the equerries, the royal officials responsible for guiding ceremonial movements, waited beyond a second doorway. The silence gave Catherine one final chance to say what had been troubling her since the previous evening. Catherine told Charles there was still time to restore Camilla's place. She feared the ceremony would deepen the family division and make it appear that she had pushed the Queen aside to advance her own future. The princess did not want authority born from humiliation. She wanted no part of a victory that required another woman to suffer in public. Charles listened without interruption. Then the king admitted the failure he had avoided naming for years. He had allowed tension between the households to grow because confrontation frightened him more than silence. By postponing one painful argument after another, he had given doubt room to harden into rivalry. Catherine answered with equal honesty. She said her future role could not begin with Camilla's disgrace. Charles did not dismiss the Queen's pain. He said it was real, and perhaps unavoidable, but protecting her from every consequence would force William and Catherine to carry the cost instead. The monarch then revealed the deeper meaning of the day. This ceremony was not intended to declare Catherine queen, remove Camilla from his private life, or accelerate William's accession, the formal moment when an heir becomes sovereign. It was meant to prove that the crown could pass forward without treating the next generation as an enemy. Charles asked for one promise. When Catherine's own moment came, she must never punish the future merely to reassure the present. The monarchy could not survive if every generation feared the one waiting behind it. Catherine reached for his hand. She promised to protect both the crown and the family members destined to inherit it. Charles closed his fingers around hers, then released them as the first notes of the procession began. The king straightened, gathered his strength, and offered her his arm. Catherine accepted. Neither spoke Camilla's name, yet both understood what the gesture would cost. Their promise had lasted only seconds. Once the chapel doors opened, however, it belonged to the nation, and the nation immediately began deciding what it meant. Before the service had ended, the image was already everywhere. King Charles walking slowly through St. George's Chapel with Catherine beside him, while Camilla followed several steps behind. To some, it looked like rejection. To others, succession. To millions, it was the clearest sign yet that the monarchy had turned toward William and Catherine. The palace offered only a restrained explanation, but the public did not wait for official language. They understood the symbolism before anyone confirmed the decision. Broadcasters first described Catherine's position as an unexpected change to the royal formation, the carefully arranged order deciding where each family member enters, sits, and stands. Within minutes, commentators noticed something far more serious. She had occupied every ceremonial place assigned to Camilla in the published schedule. This was not one altered chair. The entire service had been rebuilt around her. The palace responded with a brief statement. Charles had personally approved a revised formation to represent continuity between the present reign and the future crown. Yet the message avoided the question dominating every discussion. Why had Camilla been moved? The answer seemed to arrive through one unforgettable image. The following morning, a national newspaper filled its front page with Charles and Catherine entering the chapel beneath the headline, "The King's Final Choice." Behind them, the Queen stood alone between Princess Anne and Prince Edward. The photograph captured authority moving forward, and pain being forced to follow. Hundreds gathered outside Windsor Castle after the service. When Catherine's car passed through the gates, the crowd began chanting her name. She lowered her head, clearly moved but uncomfortable with celebration. The princess understood that each cheer for her could feel like another wound to Camilla. Not everyone saw victory. One broadcaster paused over the account of the Queen putting on her gloves before entering, and called her composure the loneliest moment of the ceremony. Sympathy spread quickly. Camilla had lost the central place, but she had not walked away or allowed private devastation to destroy Charles' final service. William watched the coverage with growing concern. The prince feared Catherine was being presented as the architect of the Queen's removal. He ordered the communications team to make one fact unmistakable: the decision had belonged to his father alone. Then analysts returned to the closing blessing. Camilla looked briefly toward Charles and Catherine. The king met her eyes for a single second, before lowering his head. There was no hatred in that exchange. Only pain, recognition, and the cost of a decision neither could undo. The public meaning finally settled. Catherine had not seized Camilla's position. Charles had deliberately handed her a burden. The cameras captured a reordered monarchy, but the final verdict would come from what each royal chose to do after the applause ended. The ceremony ended with no public confrontation, no dramatic departure, and no reversal of the king's order. Yet the monarchy that left St. George's Chapel was not the same one that had entered. Charles had used his final ceremonial act to acknowledge the future. Catherine had accepted that responsibility without triumph. Camilla had endured a painful demotion without destroying the occasion, and William had watched the crown move one visible step closer to him. The verdict was already written in their choices. Charles left after the final blessing with Catherine still beside him. At the west door, William joined them, completing the image of the present monarch standing with the couple expected to carry the institution forward. The blessing, the service's final prayer of protection and duty, had ended. Its meaning had only begun to settle. Camilla departed with Princess Anne and Prince Edward, according to the revised order. The Queen did not abandon the ceremony, challenge Catherine, or force the family's private wound into public view. She carried the humiliation without surrendering her dignity, and that restraint preserved the crown even as it cost her personally. Charles visited her later without aids. The king admitted the ceremony had wounded her, and did not ask her to pretend otherwise. Camilla answered that she understood why he had acted, though she might never forgive how he had done it. Neither raised their voice. Their documented private account ended with honesty rather than comfort. Catherine rejected every suggestion of celebration. She told her household that the day must never be treated as a victory over Camilla. Later, she admitted to William that taking the Queen's place felt less like advancement and more like accepting an obligation that would shape the rest of their lives. The prince understood. He had seen the burden arrive before the crown itself. Charles returned alone to his study and placed the revised procession card inside a red archive box, a secure container used to preserve significant royal records. Before closing it, He looked at Catherine's name beside his own and wrote beneath it, "Continuity secured." The decision had never meant Camilla no longer mattered. It meant the monarchy could not organize its future around protecting anyone from succession. She lost the central position, but kept her dignity. Catherine gained responsibility without revenge. Charles chose duty over private comfort. The image that shocked the nation was neither victory nor punishment. It was a transfer of trust. One generation accepted its ending, another accepted its burden, and the crown turned forward. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.